Kizuna is a talentless reject who gets disowned by his own mother for being a weak bum. However, when his sister discovers that he can give strength to girls by giving them his milk, she makes him clap every shoddy in their army to make them overpowered. It starts inside the bedroom where Kizuna is clapping a fellow comrade Himikawa to increase her power levels. After he finishes her chamber of secrets, Himikawa reaches maximum strength and leaves the love chamber with him. Outside, they run into the queen of mommy milkers, Yuri, who complains that Himikawa always takes a long time to charge. She believes Himikawa has started to like getting backshots from Kizuna, but she claims she'd never do it with this disgusting loser that wasn't important for the mission. Just as she suits up, they are suddenly ambushed by a robot, but another comrade named Ain saves them. She then locks Kizuna in the love chamber and demands he unclogs her pipes without wasting any time. Kizuna argues that he's still in post-nut clarity, but Ain wants him to use his weapon on her so she can pull out a forbidden weapon of her own.
What do you mean by that?
Before any of this, Kizuna is on a train and recalls getting dumped by his mother years ago. Just then, he receives an email from his sister Riri informing him of his admission to ataraxia, and Kizuna is frustrated because she made contact after all this time just to tell him about this. Soon after, Kizuna arrives at the research facility of Atraxia, which specializes in training people to fight otherworldly invasions. Once he gets familiar with the surroundings, he gets a call from Riri and asks why he is here despite having bad grades. Riri tells him not to make excuses and to come to the HQ because she needs him and his heart hybrid gear. Kizuna immediately runs to see her but gets lost on the way, and that's when he notices a white-haired girl pretending to look cool. She notices him glaring at her melons and immediately confronts him in a strict tone. After dropping a whole diss track on him, she introduces herself as Ain from Class 2A and tells him to get on his knees. Just then, the sirens go off in the whole academy, and while Kizuna believes it's a false alarm, Ain tells him to be on guard just in case. She then takes her jacket off and tells Kizuna to skedaddle, making the guy wonder why she's displaying her assets to him for no reason. She then reveals her pilot's suit underneath the uniform and activates it, causing the suit called the Heart Hybrid to form around her body. However, the system tells her that her battery is low and she won't be able to fight for long. Just then, a Magitech android attacks and Ain pulls out the big guns to fight it. As she flies into the air, more anti-air guns emerge from the ground and target the unit attacking the facility. Soon after, the defense system of the entire academy is activated, and Kizuna rejoins Ain in the forest to ask what is going on. She tells him that this is routine for ataraxia, and that he should evacuate before he's targeted by the androids. As more of them appear in the sky, Kizuna wonders if he should fight too and recalls how his mother told him that he's a talentless moron who's of no use to her. Fueled by the motivation to prove her wrong, Kizuna wishes to fight, but his heart hybrid is weak. Before he can activate it, a giant Magitech robot appears behind him and is about to blow him to smithereens. Luckily, Himikawa rescues him and asks why an off-campus student is in the middle of a war zone. Soon after, Yuri arrives with a large cavalry and starts mocking Himikawa by calling Kizuna her boyfriend. She then tells her to keep fighting to keep the academy safe, and both of them fly away after telling Kizuna to find shelter. Kizuna then shifts his focus to Ain, who finds herself surrounded by several units in a giant enemy ship. However, her heart hybrid runs out of power and she is knocked down from her flying state. At that moment, Kizuna recalls his sister's encouraging words and decides to activate her heart hybrid. He then flies into the air and catches her mid-fall, only to crash into the forest anyway. However, Ain is pretty beat up and unable to move, making him wonder if he should take time to go into her melons or find a way to help her. Just then, Riri calls him using Ain's hybrid system and tells him to squeeze her chug jugs if he wants to save her. Kizuna argues she'll call the FBI to his house, but Riri tells him not to think and just do as she says. She then asks him to feel her body and think of it as him checking for wounds. The guy does as asked, carefully caressing every nook and cranny, which somehow powers up her heart hybrid. Soon after, he hears an explosion nearby and shoves his face into her chamber of secrets to speed up the process, which causes Ain to regain consciousness. Riri tells him to keep going, and the guy squeezes some more melons until Ain is back in full strength, much to his shock. Riri explains that the heart hybrid gear is charged by the power of love and heart, and what he just did like giving CPR to a drowned. Kizuna asks Ain if she's okay, but seeing the state of her body, she smacks him in the face and sends him flying. She asks what he did to her when she was unconscious, but then realizes her hybrid count is back to a maximum, which surprises her. Leaving the answers for later, Ain spots a large platoon of enemy troops in the sky and marches right into them, taking them out one after the other with ease. Soon after, Himikawa and Yuri join her, but the enemy ship quickly retreats before they can catch it. They ask Ain how she was able to fight so viciously, and Ain looks and Kizuna for answers. Meanwhile, the principal and high commander of Ataraxia, Riri, declares that they've taken the first step, and even though they are far from their goal, the dream of retaking the lost world has now become a reality. Later, she gives a speech in the auditorium, stating that 15 years ago, a tear in space-time invited countless otherworldly beings to the Earth, and every military in the world suffered a horrible defeat at their hands. The gates closed 2 weeks after they first opened, and the danger seemed to have passed. However, the same gates opened 6 months ago, and only those living on ocean floats managed to survive. During this time, humans have developed heart hybrid gears that are capable of fighting the enemy's Magitech weapons. Riri then introduces everyone to Ataraxia's ace team Amaterasu, which comprises Yuri, Himikawa, Ain, and Kizuna for some reason. Turns out, Riri has found a use for his otherwise useless brother because he has something that can make the heart hybrid gears even more powerful. She then shows everyone the video of him running his magic on Ain, and Himikawa, who is the councilwoman of the disciplinary committee, calls him out for his actions. However, Riri tells everyone that Kizuna was able to recharge the heart hybrid by clapping Ain, so all members of the Amaterasu must spam the jump button on his joystick to become even more powerful. She makes it a necessary requirement for all those who want to join the group, essentially turning her brother into a harem protagonist. Later, Kizuna is woken up by Ain, who wants to get her early dose of clapping to recharge her heart hybrid. He asks her why she's in such a hurry but is interrupted by a knock on the door by Himikawa. She apologizes for assuming he's a womanizer and admits she should have heard his side of the story. She then enters the room to find Ain on top of him and assumes he lured her in by showing her his giant monster truck. However, Ain reveals she was the one who lured him in so she could perform the heart hybrid and get stronger. Himikawa refuses to let the dorms turn into Look's maxing chambers and fights Ain, which causes an explosion in the room. Later, the girls find it absurd how Kizuna is allowed to live in the girls' dorm, but they have no choice but to accept Riri's orders. Despite their concerns, Yuri tells them not to judge a book by its cover because even though Kizuna looks like a hermit, he might be packing a Pete Davidson down there. Just then, the Ohio Rizzler enters the class and is welcomed by Yuri, who offers her meteor-sized melons in exchange for him topping her heart hybrid. Just then, a 4-foot shoddy named Sylvia enters the class and informs Kizuna that the commander wants to speak to him. She takes the guy through the labs where Kizuna sees a picture of his mother Haida, who was the biggest contributor in developing the gear. Later, they meet up with Riri, who introduces Kizuna to the chief engineer Shakina, who uses an AI text-to-speech to communicate with him. She then gives him a portable terminal that lets him see the hybrid count of every member of the Amaterasu. Once the count goes below 5%, the hybrid gear falls apart, which means he must restore it on a regular basis by giving them back shots. Riri explains that natural means take too long for recovery, which is why she needs his gear arrows to speed up the process. She then sternly tells the guy that the fate of humanity depends on how many times he can goon in a day, and because of his responsibility, he is now the captain of Amaterasu. She also assigns Sylvia to monitor if he's doing his job or not, and Kizuna tries his best to hide the excitement in his pants. Later, the whole squad flies to an island, and Riri briefs them that they need to gather information and samples from the place. She then tells Yuri to avoid combat because her hybrid count is at 20%, but Yuri is confident she won't encounter any enemies in this area. Later, they arrive at the island and set up the data gathering machine, which will take around 2 hours to complete. In the meantime, Yuri drags Kizuna with her so they can collect some samples and get to know each other better. On the way, she learns that Kizuna is a complete virgin who's never fought before, and yesterday's battle was his first experience with any woman and the enemy. When she proposes regrouping with the other girls, a gate opens in front of her, and a giant mech emerges from it. Ain and Himikawa see the gate from a distance and immediately prepare for battle. Yuri also taps into her heart hybrid gear and asks Kizuna to contact the others, only to learn that all communication has been cut off. To make matters worse, Ain and Himikawa are trapped inside a dark dome, leaving Yuri all by herself. She tells Kizuna to go get the others, and the guy zaps away because he'll only slow her down by staying. However, he gets a warning that Yuri's hybrid count is dropping, and it's only a matter of time before her gear falls apart. Just then, a great Imagitech weapon called the Dragori emerges from the gate, and Yuri is in no condition to take it on. When she tries fighting, her hybrid count drops below 4%, and her gear disappears, leaving only strong pain in her chest. The Dragori is about to blow her open, but Kizuna returns just at the right time and takes the hit. Yuri can't understand why he would risk his life for someone he's just met, but the guy has not one but two big reasons to do so. The guy then starts playing with her Fortnite chug jugs, which causes Yuri's hybrid count to reach a maximum. With her powers restored, she thanks Kizuna and goes on to obliterate the Dragori with a single attack. Meanwhile, Ain and Himikawa are freed from the dome at the exact same time, and the connection between them is also restored. Yuri happily tells the girls that she did a heart hybrid with Kizuna, and while Himeka is disappointed, Ain appears to be jealous. Returning to the HQ, they discuss the possible dangers that lie around the island, and Riri blames herself for not accessing the threats properly. Kizuna adds that Yuri was in a lot of pain when her hybrid count dropped below 5. After Kizuna leaves, Shikna asks Riri if he wants to tell him the truth but suggests they wait until he's ready. Later, the guy returns to his dorm and finds Ain on his bed, ready to get his V-card swiped. Just then, Yuri enters the room and asks the guy to take her to Pound Town. The two girls start arguing about who gets to go first. Just then, Himeka enters the room and starts bashing both of them, causing another explosion inside the dorm. During the training exercise, Ain showcases her newfound strength to the school, and Sylvia wishes to be like her one day. When Kizuna calls her amazing, she gets offended and asks if this is the best compliment his poo-poo brain could come up with. Meanwhile, Himikawa and Yuri take turns fighting dummy mechs, and Riri notices that the heart hybrid has really elevated both Yuri and Ain's powers. Riri is satisfied with the results and proceeds to the next stage of the plan. But with great power comes great responsibility. Later, Yuri cuddles up to Kizuna and asks what he thought of her performance during the training exercise. Kizuna says she is America's best for a reason, so she demands he takes her to Kyoto Float as a reward. Kizuna tells her that this is a replica because there wasn't enough time to gather all the materials, and Yuri wishes to see the real one once they reclaim Japan. When Kizuna expresses a will to fight those who destroyed their world, Yuri gets happy and drags him across the entire mega float. In the evening, Kizuna asks Yuri why she wanted to travel the mega float today, and Yuri tells him that when she was attacked on the island, she thought she might die for real. However, when he saved her, she decided that she would make the most of her life and experience different things like falling in love or getting her V-card swiped. At night, Kizuna returns from his supposed date and runs into Himikawa. The two walk to the dorm together, and Himikawa says she has to stay late in school to make sure boys like him don't drill holes into bathroom soaps. Despite being rather uptight, Himikawa wants to make school life a little more fun for everyone, making Kizuna realize she's quite dedicated to her duties. When he compliments her devotion, Himikawa gets flustered and loses her balance, but Kizuna saves her from falling. As he holds her in his arms, Himikawa turns into a human water park with no lifeguard on duty, which causes a heart hybrid. Just then, they hear a loud thud and investigate it, only to find Ain kickboxing in her room. Himikawa reveals Ain always trains by herself, and even when she offered to spar with her, Ain turned her down. Despite being part of the Amaterasu, Ain keeps her distance from the rest, which reminds Kizuna of the first time he saw her. Meanwhile, Riri notes that Kizuna has managed a heart hybrid with Himikawa as well, which means she cannot run from the truth anymore. The next day, Kizuna asks the girls in her class about Ain, but no one seems to know anything about her. Just then, Ain herself shows up and asks him to join her in the park. Once there, Kizuna hesitates to talk, but she breaks the silence by offering him what she claims are handmade sandwiches. She explains she bought them from the store, cut them in half, and put them inside a lunchbox. But Kizuna says that doesn't fall under the handmade category. However, Ain keeps yapping about it, making the guy realize that she's got the face of a magazine cover and the IQ of an unplugged toaster. After he gobbles up the sandwiches, she asks him to taste test her Niagara Falls because she read in a magazine that guys love takeout. When Kizuna hesitates, she demands he enter munch mode and start the kitty cat buffet. Kizuna still doesn't go for it, so she takes her jacket off and displays her chug jugs. She then grabs his hand and places it on the good stuff, but Kizuna asks her not to force it because she has to think about what the other person feels. Ain says I don't care and that she wants to become stronger than Himikawa and Yuri. Seeing the determination in her eyes, Kizuna finally agrees and starts juicing her watermelons. He then pins her down to the bench and is about to kiss her but backs out at the last second after seeing the look on her face. He then suggests they take the time to get to know each other, but Ain says that's impossible and runs off. Just then, Kizuna gets a call from Riri, who asks him to meet her at the HQ. Once there, Kizuna is taken to the room where he underwent the core installation surgery for the heart hybrid gear. Even though he was scared, he did it to satisfy his mother, but even that didn't do it. He then asks Riri to give him information on Ain because he can't clap her without knowing her better. But Riri says there are no records of her early life. 7 years ago, a girl with no identity was found, and she had lost all her memories to the point that she didn't even know her own name. A physical exam was conducted on her to identify her origins, but instead, they found that she was super compatible with gears. Haida took her in, named her Ain, and turned her into a lab rat. From that day onwards, Ain's life was nothing but an experiment, but it all stopped when Haida suddenly disappeared. Kizuna realizes that Ain has been all alone from the very start, and despite her walls, he's hopeful that he can get through to her. Following that, Shakina shows him a top-secret archive that takes him into the memory of another student who was forced to exchange his heart hybrid count by Haida. After the count dropped to 0, the student in question lost their life, but Haida was unfazed about it, which implies she must have done it before. After the memory ends, Kizuna is told that if the hybrid count of any unit drops to 0, they will die on the spot, and no one except the 3 of them knows about it. Kizuna realizes everyone who has had a core installed into their body is on the verge of death and questions Riri's morality for keeping it a secret. Shakina admits that they were devastated when they found out, and Kizuna urges them to find another way. Riri argues that they do not have the resources or time to find a new path, and this is all they have to save humanity. She knows she's a horrible person for making others risk their lives, but that is the crime she's willing to commit to save humanity. This is why Kizuna is essential to the world, because he is the only one who can save their lives. Later, Ain recalls an old conversation with Haida when she told her that her hybrid gear has a hidden weapon called Immoral, and she'll only be able to use it once her hybrid count goes above a certain level. She advises her to keep working hard, and Ain gets excited for the day she can unlock her secret weapon. At present, the sirens go off in the academy, and all the defense systems are activated at once. Kizuna rushes to the HQ to get a brief on the situation, and Riri tells him that the entire place is swarming by the enemy forces. Their numbers are too huge, but the Amaterasu gang doesn't hesitate and rushes into battle. The main target is the large battleship, and they have to take it down before it comes in range of the mega float. The 3 of them work in perfect synergy to take out dozens of Magitech units, but even amid battle, Ain worries about performing better than Yuri and Himikawa. She tries to overshadow them, but her hybrid count drops quickly to 50%, making Kizuna worry. He even warns her to take it easy, but Ain doesn't listen and charges headfirst into the enemy Dragori. After she blows it up, Ain declares that she is every bit as good as Yuri and Himikawa, but Kizuna tells him to retreat because her hybrid count is less than 10%. Once again, Ain refuses to listen and marches right in, so Kizuna leaves the HQ to help her before her battery drains to 0. In the meantime, Ain goes unconscious after taking a hit from the battleship and falls into a body of water below. She then wakes up inside the lab with Kizuna by her side, and he tells her that a squad of Magitech weapons is landing as they speak. Ain gets back up because she wants to fight more, but Kizuna tells him to sit tight because her hybrid count is below 5%. Realizing she is falling behind the other 2, she starts having a breakdown and states that she has no reason to live. She then tells him that she has no family or name and was brought here years ago where she became Dr. Haida's test subject. She has been a tool all her life, and whenever she tries to take part in normal human activities, she feels like she is betraying her true purpose. Kizuna asks why she never made any friends, and Ain reveals it's because she is incapable of holding a conversation. Whenever she did well in combat training, Dr. Haida praised her, but that was all Ain was capable of. However, she can't even do the one thing she was good at because Yuri and Himeka are better than her when it comes to handling the gear. She then recalls Dr. Haida telling her that there is an incredibly powerful immoral weapon inside her which can be obtained with a high hybrid count. However, her hybrid count kept dropping and that weapon appeared to be impossible to obtain. That is until Kizuna appeared. Ain promised herself that she would make him fall for her and achieve a higher hybrid count, but then she realized she didn't have any reas because she grew up as a lab experiment. She read magazines that told her to make lunch for him, but since she didn't know how to cook, she bought sandwiches from a store and put them in a lunchbox. She then read a book on how to please a man and approached him to give him the best sloppy toppy of his life, but was unsuccessful. She even tried to raise him up in the park, but he turned her down because he wanted to know her better. In the end, all her tricks to obtain the immoral weapon failed, so now she feels like she has no reason to be alive. Instead of sympathizing, Kizuna scolds her for being selfish, but Ain stays in denial, claiming he doesn't know anything about her. He tells her that everyone in this world has a purpose, but Ain doesn't want to hear his TED talk and takes a swing at him. She stops at the very last second and asks him why he didn't even flinch, but then realizes it's because he knows she can't even beat him in her current state. Kizuna then tells her that he was Haida's lab rat too until she found someone better, aka Ain. He was sent back to the real world to touch some grass, but he felt so disconnected that he couldn't even talk to anyone. However, his sister told him that a person's value is not determined by their abilities, but by the choices they make in their life. He gives the same advice to Ain, and when she says she doesn't know how to live, he tells her that they can both start over as long as they stick together. Ain then starts blushing and asks the guy to hit it from the back so she can start over. With newfound chemistry between them, Kizuna pins her down and slaps her kitty, causing a huge outburst of energy. As Kizuna gets hit with post-nut clarity, Ain gets on top of him and tells him it's time for round 2. Just then, Shakina uses the cons system to tell him that Ain is creating pipe like a plumber on overtime, and it is a side effect of a successful heart hybrid. If Kizuna can give Ain a happy ending, she can achieve an even higher level of hybrid count, which will allow her to obtain the immoral weapon. With that knowledge, Kizuna gets to work and gives her a tongue twister that she'll remember for years to come, causing yet another surge of energy in the room. Just as Yuri starts to struggle against the Magitech weapons, Ain arrives after getting her guts rearranged and notes that the enemy has caused significant damage to the front lines. Fueled with anger, she summons the immoral weapon pulverizer and starts charging it. Kizuna buys time for her by destroying the approaching units, and both Yuri and Himikawa can't understand why he's suddenly so strong. Ain finally releases a large beam from her pulverizer and eradicates the entire enemy fleet. With that, the Academy lives to fight another day, and the management holds a party to celebrate their win. Meanwhile, Ain meets Kizuna on the balcony and reveals that Bro clapped her so hard she unlocked the DLC lore pack. What? In her regained memories, she sees a beautiful lake with snow-covered mountain peaks, a huge city with illuminated buildings, and a huge mechanical clock that covers the whole wall. She wants him to clap even harder so she can download her entire memory, but Himeka and Yuri show and start arguing. Sylvia asks Kizuna to stop them, but he gently tells her to let them be for a while. Meanwhile, Shakina pulls up the footage of the battle and informs Riri that there was a human among the attackers and they seem to be wearing a heart hybrid suit. Years ago, while Himeka is guiding people off the Tokyo float, she finds a scared girl with a teddy bear and tells her not to worry because she will take out all the bad guys for her. At present, Kizuna gets permission to have the women's bath all to himself for the night, but as he happily steps in, he finds Himeka with her assets on display. She immediately covers her melons and frantically asks what he is doing here. Before he can explain himself, she activates her gear and gives him a taste of domestic violence. The next day, they take the matter to Riri, who reveals she purposely didn't tell Himikawa because she was hoping they would hit it off if she saw the size of his sausage. When she says she is disappointed with the results, Himikawa starts to protest but shuts up after she is reminded of her low hybrid count. Storming out of the office, she can't bring himself to let Kizuna break her factory seal, but then recalls the time he saved her from a huge fall. Later in class, the students learn that all the mega floats of the world have lost connection with each other, but Himikawa is more focused on building a connection with Kizuna. Just then, Kizuna is asked to come to a warehouse where Riri shows him a simulator she has been working on. They use it to change the surroundings and his clothes, essentially allowing Matarasu to have more realistic mock battles. Riri then explains that it can also turn into a cute date spot or a hotel room, which will give him a better chance of getting those shotties on his ding-dong. The simulator also learns from Kizuna's desire to increase the chances of a heart hybrid, which causes Riri to become Mai from Bunny Girl Senpai. She then orders the guy to start clapping, so Kizuna invites the one with the biggest mommy milkers to test the simulator. The system then starts changing the room according to Yuri's desires until her moist mode is activated. She suddenly pins the guy down and vows to give him the Gok Gok 3000 Deluxe Edition. However, the system puts her in a blindfold and handcuffs to maximize the efficiency of the heart hybrid. Using this to his advantage, Kizuna squeezes her milk packs and gives her a happy ending along with a heart hybrid. In the evening, Himikawa spots two NPCs trying to hit it and stops them because she's part of the disciplinary committee. Just then, Kizuna shows up and asks if she'd like to ride his roller coaster, but before she can answer, Sivlia comes running in with her test results. Seeing all is on her report, Kizuna gives her praise and Himikawa uses this chance to slip past him. Later, Riri invites them to the HQ and informs them that they received a weak radio from Guam, which once housed a US military base. Their next mission is to find the source of the signal, and Ain is confident she can wipe the enemies with her pulverizer. Yuri reminds her that she cannot use her immoral weapon again at will, but Ain says she can just let Kizuna hit it again to ensure the mission's success. Yuri says it's her turn now and asks Kizuna to pick up where he left off, starting another argument between the two. As the squad then flies to Guam, Shakina wonders if the signals were sent by Dr. Haida, piquing Riri's curiosity. Once they arrive at the float, Kizuna and Himikawa survey the city of Tumen, while the other two check the Air Force base. Yuri and Ain learn that the base was swiped before it was abandoned, and the only thing left is the old communication system. On the other hand, Kizuna and Himikawa go through the city, and the latter finds a teddy bear on the road, reminding her of the little girl she met in Tokyo some years ago. Just then, they find a woman enjoying tea on a pile of debris, and when they approach her, she amusingly activates her hybrid gear. Himikawa asks her what country she belongs to, and the woman reveals she is from the proud empire of Batlantis, which rules over half of the world. She then introduces herself as Aldea and reveals she is an alien from their perspective before attacking them. Himikawa decides to fight back, but quickly realizes that she alone is no match for her. Soon after, Yuri and Ain join the battle, and Aldea is excited to see Ain in the flesh because is the one who single-handedly wiped the entire fleet the other day. She wants to talk more with Ain, but the others keep disturbing her, so she summons a giant three-headed dragon to stop them. Seeing the dragon reminds Himikawa of the time when it destroyed the entire Tokyo float, so she marches in without wasting a second. The other three join her as well, but none of their blades or lasers are strong enough to pierce through the dragon's armor. In the end, Kizuna makes the wise decision to retreat, and Aldea is forced to let them go because her heart hybrid is running out of power. Later, Shikina tells them about Aldea and her special hybrid gear that allows her to warp through space. Ain figures she was the one who locked her and Himikawa in the dome, and Kizuna adds Aldea belongs to Batlantis Empire, which is on the other side of the gates. Shikina then briefs them on the tri-headed dragon, revealing that its power exceeds Magitech of a grade, which is why it's classified as an S-class. Himeka recalls the destruction it's caused before and demands immediate action, but Riri says they already completed their mission, and she won't allow anyone to play the hero. Himikawa starts to lose her cool, and when others try to calm her down, she accuses them of getting cold feet before running off to the dorms. Later, Kizuna visits her room to check up on her, but realizes she's already gone. Turns out, Himikawa has gone right back to Guan, where she comes face to face with Aldea again. She asks Aldea to bring out the tri-headed dragon, but Aldea says she will have to go through her first. The two begin fighting, and it is obvious that Himikawa cannot beat her in a million years. Aldea then easily traps her in the labyrinth cube and begins torturing her, only to get interrupted by a laser beam. Looking up in the sky, she realizes that the Amaterasu gang has returned to Himikawa's rescue. Aldea lets go of her to deal with Yuri, while Kizuna quickly tends to Himikawa. She asks why they came to save her, and Kizuna says it is because they are comrades. As Ain joins the fray, Aldea is once again intrigued by her presence and asks for an introduction. When Ain tells her her name, Aldea seems to be confused, and it appears as if she is somehow related to her past. After reciting a slogan to reignite her memories, Aldea summons the tri-headed dragon and asks Ain to demonstrate her power by defeating it. Himikawa wants to jump into action, but her hybrid count drops, and she's forced to stay out of it. Just then, Riri arrives in a helicopter and drops the simulation chamber right next to Kizuna, so he can clap Himikawa and recharge her hybrid count. Kizuna quickly carries her inside in hopes of some sloppy toppy, but Himikawa starts yapping about how much trouble she has caused everyone. Kizuna asks why she's so determined to take the tri-head down, and she reveals it's because she has encountered it before. During the second collision, she was tasked with evacuating the Tokyo float when the dragon suddenly appeared and wiped everyone in its path. Being Japan's best hybrid, Himikawa thought she could take anything down, but was humbled at that moment and realized how weak she truly was. Back then, she used to laze around and attend parties instead of training, but after the incident, she became a highly disciplined student in hopes that she could rectify her mistake. Despite all of that, she couldn't save anyone back then, and she still cannot save anyone now. Kizuna begs to differ, stating that she is talking to the person she saved and reminds her of their first encounter in the woods. He tells her that she's saved countless lives, and the reason she doesn't keep count is because she is a good person at heart. Kizuna understands how she feels because he himself is a weak loser who can barely defend himself, let alone others, but if she lets him hit it from the back, they will both become powerful enough to face the threat outside this room. After getting the green light from Himikawa, Kizuna begins running his Ohio Rees all over her body and squeezes her milk packs until she turns into the Amazon rainforest. The guy then gives her a tongue twister to achieve the heart hybrid, but they have to take it to the next level to draw out her immoral weapon. Using the simulation machine, he turns her into a cat girl and starts squeezing her tail until her kitty is satisfied. In her post-nut clarity, Himikawa summons a weapon named Gladius, and while remembering her failure to protect the people of Tokyo, she takes a swing and destroys the dragon in one hit. Aldea feels threatened by her power and starts attacking Kizuna, who is in distress because his gear has no weapons that he knows of. However, he realizes he can produce a katana thanks to the climax hybrid that he did with Himikawa. Together with the girls, Kizuna manages to corner Aldia, but she opens a gate and summons several Magitech ships to defend herself. Subsequently, a large underwater facility emerges and Yuri reveals they are America's Heart hybrid units that are on their side. Before she gets the party started, Aldia hears a voice from the gate asking her to return. Addressing the voice as Grable, she asks what she is doing here, and Gabriel replies that she's come to bring her back. Aldia hesitantly retreats along with the rest of her fleet. The threat is averted at least for now. Later, the girls mock Himikawa for getting on Kizuna's pogo stick, but are interrupted by the arrival of the US units. Yuri, being an American herself, recognizes one of them as Scarlet, but she tells her to stay away and that she will never forgive her. Later that night, Ain wakes up from a weird nightmare and recalls the slogan Aldia recited to her. Meanwhile, Aldia arrives at the other side and tells Grable that the girl named Ain is in possession of the Magitech gear called Zeros. Back at the HQ, Shakina receives an anonymous tip on the way to seal the gates, and with that knowledge, Riri wants to launch a joint US-Japan operation to retake Okinawa. The next day, Kizuna enjoys lunch with Yuri when he is joined by the Masters Group, which consists of Scarlet, Gertrude, and Sharon. Turns out they have joined the academy for a joint operation, and Scarlet wants to befriend Kizuna so he can stick his nose where it doesn't belong and increase her hybrid count. Yuri is upset because Scarlet ruined her supposed date with Kizuna, but the guy ignores their yapping and notices Ain sitting all by herself at a separate table. The girls then drag the guy outside and fight among themselves over who gets to lick first. They play several games at the arcade, but always end up in a tie, so they decide to try on a steamy swimsuit and have Kizuna pick one of them. Kizuna is naturally drawn to Yuri's meteor mommy milkers, but Scarlet plays unfairly and drags him away. Hiding in the changing room, Scarlet reveals she is intrigued by the concept of Heart Hybrid and wants Kizuna to drill her Chamber of Secrets so she can achieve it as well. She then forces Kizuna to taste test her dessert and is about to turn on the faucet, but Yuri finds them and puts a stop to it. Later, Yuri can't tolerate her presence and decides to leave, and Kizuna figures she and Scarlet used to be close friends given how they were tied in each game. Scarlet frantically denies it and states that Yuri is a horrible person who used them as pawns. She then reveals that their squad encountered a Dragori some years ago, and none of them were strong enough to face it. Yuri intentionally sent all of them ahead to wear it down and then swooped in at the last second to claim all the glory for herself. Kizuna refuses to believe the story because the Yuri he knows would never do such a thing, but Scarlet doesn't care to convince him and returns to the dorm. Yuri suddenly returns, and when Kizuna asks if the story is true, she leaves without explaining herself. Meanwhile, Aldia and Grable receive a warm welcome from the people of Batlantis and are treated to a fine dinner. The two reminisce about their battle of the past in which they gave each other permanent scars. Following that, Aldia takes Grable into their room and gives her a tongue twister until their bed sheet looks like a war zone. Meanwhile, Sylvia brings Kizuna sweets that she learned to make in the home eats class. Seeing her improve, Kizuna comments that she will become a great wife, making her think he plans to marry her. Later, he walks by Ain's room and sees her fretting over not finding any data on her past. He enters her room and offers her Saliva's cookies, and even though she is still angry, she decides to taste them. Kizuna then tells her that he will listen to her rant for hours if she lets him hit it again, prompting her to consider her options. However, the sirens go off again, and Grable jumps out of the battleship all by herself. As Gertrude leads the units to confront her, she demands they hand over the Zeros and the woman operating it. When Sharon takes a shot at her from a distance, Grable realizes talking is pointless and wipes out dozens of units in a matter of seconds. By the time Amaterasu shows up, the whole place looks like the aftermath of Eren Yeager's rumbling. Scarlet then notices Gertrude and Sharon among the fallen and loses her mind, causing her to attack recklessly. Grable is about to game end her, but Kizuna jumps in front and takes the hit. The Amaterasu girl then fights her head-on, but both Himikawa and Yuri are defeated instantly. Scarlet rushes in once again and is also defeated, leaving only Ain and her Zeros. As Grable starts toying with her, Kizuna tries to protect her but is swatted away like a fly, and Grable invites Ain to join them if she wants to learn about her past. However, when Kizuna rises up once again, she realizes she's run out of magic and immediately retreats, hoping to bring Zeros back the next time. After she leaves, Kizuna goes unconscious because of his injuries. A week later, Shakina informs the squad of the damages that were caused by Grable, and luckily, they get away with minimum casualties. Just then, Kizuna enters the room, and everyone is delighted to see him in one piece. Riri then explains that Grable is way stronger than Aldia, and it is pretty evident that she was after Ain and her dear Zeros. Ain herself has no idea why they're after her, and believes it must be related to the past she doesn't remember. Riri then explains that they need to close the Tokyo and Okinawa gates if they want to take back Japan, but Grable is blocking their path. They will need a new kind of hybrid called the connective hybrid to beat her. To achieve that state, Kizuna has to clap 2 shotties at once. This allows the units to combine the power of 3 at once, and a hybrid count that is otherwise impossible to reach becomes feasible. Himikawa argues that she doesn't want to do it with another girl, but Riri asserts that it is the only way to beat Grable as it allows them to summon a new immoral weapon. Shikina then informs them that connective hybrid does not require a happy ending because it functions on the power of friendship. Hearing that, Kizuna decides to clap Yuri and Scarlet first because he knows they have a strong history. Meanwhile, Scarlet and Sharon helplessly watch Gertrude on a ventilator because she was gravely injured in the previous attack. Just then, Kizuna calls Scarlet and tells her to visit him so they can test a new training exercise. Scarlet agrees but then finds herself in a bathtub with Yuri, much to her annoyance. Yuri cuddles up to Kizuna to tease Scarlet, prompting her to lose her cool and jump right into his lap. Yuri joins her as well and Kizuna cuddles them both, causing both of them to get a quick happy ending. Wanting more, Yuri puts her melons out and asks Scarlet to do the same, but she slips and falls right into her lap. Yuri believes it was intentional and recalls the days Scarlet used to follow her everywhere and addressed her and her senpai. Just then, the simulation chamber starts showing images of the time when they were close friends, and Kizuna reveals he asked Shikina to install this footage to rekindle their lost flame. Seeing them share all sorts of emotions and times together, Scarlet is hit by nostalgia and embraces Yuri, realizing that she isn't the type of person to betray her comrades. Kizuna adds that Yuri had no idea a Dragori would show up that day, and Yuri shares the story of what actually happened that day. Turns out, the enemy units had launched missiles in a densely populated area, and Yuri didn't want her squad to see the massacre, which is why she sent them ahead. However, Yuri admits that while she didn't use them as pawns, she did take the credit for the final blow and use it to become America's ace. Despite that, Scarlet recalls how Yuri was hurt fighting other enemies but risked her life to rescue her, which allows Scarlet to forgive her. With their internal conflicts settled, both of them turn their attention to Kizuna, who gives them a finger special until their sprinkler causes a mess in the room. Following that, the 3 of them successfully achieve a connective hybrid and are tasked with launching an immediate operation to defeat Grable. Meanwhile, Grable and Aldia are waiting for Amaterasu to attack and are greeted by Ain, who is fighting the magic tech weapons all by herself. She asks Grable why she offered to take her to Batlantis, but before she can answer, Yuri and Scarlet interrupt her. They send Ain to watch the entrance and overwhelm Grable with dozens of homing missiles. Aldia easily blocks them with her shield, but Yuri pulls out her immoral weapon for the first time and marches right in. Aldia once again blocks the attack from Yuri, but she turns out to be way too much for her and penetrates her shield. While Aldia goes unconscious, Grable comes out of the smoke unscathed and vows to use her full strength against them. She then pulls out her own immoral weapon and shoots a beam at them, but Kizuna arrives just in time to block the hit. Recognizing him from their previous encounter, Grable once again charges up her weapon, but Kizuna activates a new mode in his gear and takes the fight mid-air. With the new mode, Kizuna is basically CG from San Andreas, who carries an entire military unit in pocket. As the two clash mid-air, it appears that Grable might be able to penetrate his shield, and in that moment of desperation, Kizuna manages to summon Scarlet's homing missiles and takes her out. As both of them free fall, Kizuna is caught mid-air by Scarlet, and despite suffering many injuries, Grable is more concerned about Aldia's safety. She carries Aldia and skedaddles out of there, allowing the squad to close all gates at Okinawa. With that, both Yuri and Scarlet glaze Kizuna for his performance, and Himikawa still can't believe he clapped 2 shotties at once. Meanwhile, Ain is lost in her own thoughts and wonders where she came from. After liberating Guam and Okinawa, Riri sets her eyes on the Japanese mainland and tells the Amaterasu squad to prepare for a big battle. Later, Kizuna is showing the cafeteria menu to a class of boys for the festival, but they are more interested in seeing the mommy milkers of the Amaterasu squad. Kizuna shows them holographic models of the girls he's created using data from the simulation room, and even shows them a heat graph of some of the spots he works around with. As he shows them all the different techniques to give these girls a happy ending, the boys start looking up to him as if he's the reincarnation of Eros. He also shows them recorded footage of when he slapped Himikawa's kitty to prove his point. The woman herself enters the room and scares all the gooners away. Meanwhile, Riri watches over the entire festival using cameras and sees Himikawa attacking Kizuna due to the stunt he just pulled. Later, a bruised-up Kizuna runs into Yuri, who points out the bandage on his face, but he shrugs it off because he doesn't want to embarrass Himikawa. They explain that it's time for their rehearsal, but they cannot seem to find Ain, so Kizuna leaves to look for her. While searching, he runs into Gertrude, who is still recovering from the injuries she suffered against Grebel. After checking up on her, he asks if she's seen Ain, but no luck there either. Later, he runs into a group of girls rehearsing the ring, but they scatter, thinking he'd swipe their V cards just by looking at them. Kizuna then sees Sylvia and decides to use her as a replacement for Ain. As he continues his search, he runs into the top engineer Momo, who forces him to test out the new railgun she's been working on. After getting blown up during the test, Kizuna runs into Shikina, who is selling goon material of him and the Amaterasu girls. Later, he enters Scarlet's maid-themed cafe to Ain, but she is nowhere to be seen. Eventually, the guy just waits by the window hoping she'll show up. Meanwhile, Grebel is being chained up and labeled as a traitor because she attacked without permission and kept the information on Zeros to herself. Zelshon, the leader of Batlantis, decides to attack the mainland and recover Zeros even if it means destroying the entire float, but Grebel is opposed to harming civilians. Seeing her rebel, Zelshon orders her servants to give Grebel a hands-on special and then starts whipping her to turn her into a submissive housewife. Grebel tries her best to resist her mind control because she hopes Aldea will rescue her, but her hopes and dreams are shattered when she learns that Aldea has already been turned into Zelshon's lapdog. After extracting information from Grebel, Zelshon prepares a squad of baddies to invade what they call Lemuria and retrieve Zeros. However, before she can leave, she runs into none other than Dr. Haida. Meanwhile, it's time for the concert and Ain still hasn't shown up, so they decide to take Sylvia to the stage. Kizuna finally gives up the search, but then finds Ain sitting all by herself in an empty classroom. He asks her why she looks so sad, and Ain reveals that all the memories she has recovered so far hint that she does not belong to this world. These memories only confuse her, so she tells Kizuna to refrain from clapping her from now on. However, Kizuna knows she's got the best kitty, so he uses his charms to convince her otherwise. As the girls perform the concert on stage, Kizuna starts squeezing Ain's chug jugs, but the post-nut clarity hits her so hard that she starts remembering everything from her past. She appears to be in a lot of pain from remembering, but before Kizuna can comfort her, Riri informs him that they are being attacked and he must assemble the squad. As they fly in to face the enemy troops, Kizuna notices a familiar face on the enemy battleship, his mother Haida. As Kizuna lands on to confront her, none of them understand why she's shown up after so many years of being MIA. She reveals she has been counting the days since she last saw him and reveals she needed to go to Batlantis Empire to complete her research. Recalling their last encounter, Kizuna has a handful of questions and demands that she return to Ataraxia, but she cannot return because her research still isn't complete. Riri furiously asks why she is helping the enemy, and Haida tells her that she is too dumb to understand it. Proving her point, Riri orders Kizuna to abduct Haida, but it turns out that he's been talking to her hologram all this time. Haida then tells him to come to Tokyo if he wants to see her in the flesh and skedaddles, leaving them with more questions than before. As soon as she leaves, the squad is attacked by a four-footed shoddy Ragers and her Magitech pilot named Demon. Before they can really get into it, the battleship turns around and starts flying away, leaving Ragers super annoyed. However, Haida tells her that their only goal was to speak with them, and capturing Zeros was not part of the plan. Her assistant Vard asks if they'll come to Tokyo despite the risk of an ambush, and Haida says they most definitely will. Back at HQ, Riri believes the plan to retake Tokyo was a setup. Much to their shock, she explains how they received an anonymous tip about heart hybrid restoring hybrid count and how to close the gates, and all signs prove that Haida was behind it. Despite knowing that Tokyo is a trap, they have no choice but to go there. Ain sternly says she will follow orders no matter what before she leaves the room, recalling all the painful memories that surfaced after getting clapped by Kizuna. Meanwhile, Riri tells the guide to pick a new Amaterasu member because they need more firepower to win this war. She's aware that whoever is picked will be risking their life and hands Kizuna a list of suitable candidates so he can pick which one to tap next. Checking the list, Kizuna approaches Sylvia and asks her to be a heart hybrid pilot because she's got the aptitude for it. Sylvia is excited to be a part of the squad, but Kizuna advises her to think long and hard because she'd be risking her life. Sylvia mistakes his care for a lack of confidence in her and dramatically runs off without giving him an answer. Kizuna catches up to her and makes her understand that he doesn't want his loved ones to die. She reveals she always wanted to join Amaterasu so she could find her parents who went missing in London and begs Kizuna to let her join. Seeing the determination in her eyes, he takes her to the simulation chamber and shows her the core that he is about to install in her. Without hesitation, she asks the guy to go ahead and do what he has to. Sometime later, Sylvia rests while the core stabilizes, and Kizuna vows to protect her and everyone with everything he has. A day before the mission, Momo comes bearing anti-Magitech rifles and railguns for the Masters group, and Scarlet is confident they can take back Tokyo with this weaponry. Meanwhile, Kizuna finds Ain watching the sea and reminds her that it's time for her to receive backshots, but she tells him that she's never gonna let him tap her again. She then says it was a big mistake to cry in his arms over a weird dream and confidently claims that she will be fine without anyone's help. However, it is all a ruse to make him stop worrying about her. Meanwhile, Himikawa tells Yuri that she was initially scared of going back to her hometown, but Kizuna clapped her so good, she hit factory reset. Yuri admits that his monster truck is magical, and it made her realize that it was okay to rely on others. Later, Kizuna enters the surgery room where his core was installed and has a flashback of seeing Ain crying. He asked why she was sad, and Ain told him she could not remember anything from her past. Kizuna promised to help her remember, recalling how she was always stubborn but would come around later. The next day, as the squad heads to Tokyo, the sirens go off and giant mechs start climbing the ship. Scarlet tells the Amaterasu gang to leave this to her and fly to Tokyo, so they all change into gear and fly away. On the way, they run into some more resistance, and Kizuna tells the girls to stick to their plan. As they split up, the guy sees the city line and enters a subway tunnel to avoid the enemies. Once inside, they place the signal points all across the city, and the HQ starts receiving gate coordinates from Tokyo. With that, Riri deploys the sealing units to close all gates, and the Masters group is sent to escort them. Meanwhile, Kizuna finally flies through the tunnels into the main city expecting heavy resistance, but he is shocked to see a bustling city inside. Just then, he sees Hida standing atop a building and asks her what's going on because Tokyo was to be destroyed. She then reveals that it was a mere illusion created using magic to show him a reflection of what this city used to look like. Kizuna sees that while the city has gone back to its ruined state, people there are still acting normal, much to his confusion. Haida then explains that only he was excluded from the illusion magic and everyone else is still influenced by it. This allows Haida to absorb their life energy, which is turned into magic and sent to Batlantis. When she shares her plans to turn the whole world into an energy plant, Kizuna gets furious and questions the morality of toying with innocent lives. He demands she return and teaches them how to remove the cores, but Haida reveals she doesn't know how to because she never created them to begin with. Hit with the realization that he will not be able to save all his loved ones, Kizuna starts to lose his mind and leaps in to attack Hyde, only to be stopped midway by Vard. Just then, Rhaegar shows up with backup and Kizuna flies away because he doesn't want to hurt the innocent people roaming in the streets. Eventually, the guy is backed into a corner, but the Amaterasu gang shows up at the right time to save him. In the meantime, the Master Squad is busy sealing the gates when they sense the magical presence and prepare to defend the sealing units. On the other hand, Rhaegar makes quick word of Himikawa and Yuri, leaving Ain all alone to fight her. Despite being stronger than the rest, even Ain doesn't stand a chance against her and is knocked out. Just as Rhaegar prepares to eliminate them, she is hit by a white laser from a distance, and a new mech appears on the scene. As it gets closer, Kizuna notes that Sylvia is guiding the mech, and it is her heart hybrid named Taros. She tells Kizuna to leave it to her, promising that she will not let anyone harm him. Surprisingly, she stands toe-to-toe with Rhaegar and manages to defeat her after an epic battle. As Demon is destroyed, Rhaegar sits there in disappointment, unable to accept that she, a member of the Royal Guard, was defeated by a rookie. She says it's better to die than to lose in such a humiliating fashion and decides to blow herself up like Vegeta. In the last second, Sylvia knocks her out of Demon, but the mech flies up and causes a huge explosion that is big enough to destroy the entirety of Tokyo. Being the only Amaterasu member left standing, Sylvia decides to use her immoral weapon and tank the explosion all by herself. Summoning Titania, she brings out a large godlike figure behind her mech and a coffin powerful enough to create a black hole. The black hole then ends up sucking the explosion, and Sylvia manages to save everyone all by herself. Haida takes notes and skedaddles with Rhaegar, hoping to meet Kizuna once again. Just then, more Magitech weapons show up, and since the Amaterasu members are in no condition to fight, Riri sends them a portable simulation chamber for clapping. Since Himikawa's count is the lowest, Kizuna takes her in first, while the other two provide support from the outside. Meanwhile, the entire Master Squad is turned into mindless slaves courtesy of Zelchion. On the other hand, while Kizuna is clapping Himikawa in the simulation room, Ain is struggling to focus, which frustrates her. After Himikawa gets a happy ending, The duo exits the room and Yuri complains that Himikawa always takes a long time to charge. She believes Himikawa has started to like getting back shots from Kizuna, but she claims she'd never do it with this disgusting loser if it wasn't important for the mission. Just then, Ain shows up and drags Kizuna into the simulation room, asking the guy to slap her kitty so she can pull out her immoral weapon. Kizuna argues that her hybrid count is still up, but at this point, Ain wants a ride on his monster truck just for the fan service. Just then, the room turns into the classroom and Ain cannot understand why she wants to get clapped here out of all the places. Kizuna wastes no time milking her melons and then proceeds to make her go commando. When she's called up front to solve a problem on the blackboard, Ain is extremely embarrassed because her classmates can see her assets. Despite people gossiping behind her back, Ain gets excited, which increases her hybrid count. After the lecture ends, Ain is all alone with Kizuna and the class, and her eyes hint that she wants Kizuna to do it. Outside, Yuri contacts Sylvia to check up on her, but she too has fallen under Zelshion's mind control. Just then, the final boss herself shows up and promises to give them sweet dreams. Back in the chamber, Ain reveals she's leaking like a faulty faucet and can't hold back anymore, but instead of letting her use the restroom, Kizuna turns the whole room into a stage while hundreds of audience members so they can all watch Ain have her factory seal removed. Despite being on the verge of a happy ending, Ain keeps resisting because she is too embraced, but Kizuna assures her that it'll be okay because he's right by her side. In the end, Ain finally gives in and gets clapped so hard she's taken into another dimension. When she regains consciousness, she finds herself in Kizuna's arms and he reveals that the climax hybrid failed. Ain believes it's her fault because she was too scared, and as they exit the room, they find Himikawa, Yuri, and Sylvia all done and dusted. Zelshun then introduces herself as captain of the Royal Guard and explains that she's put the girls in a state of trance and their souls are currently fighting for their lives inside their minds. Himikawa finds herself in a burned-out Tokyo with a tri-headed dragon and a little girl blaming her for what happened to the city. Soon after, many others who died back then crawl onto her, leaving her in a horrified state. Yuri finds herself rushing to save Scarlet and the others who are fighting a Dragori. By the time she reaches, all her squad members have been wiped, filling her with immense guilt. Ain realizes she's using psychological torture to hurt her enemies and calls her a coward, but Zelshun hits her with a begone thought. At the HQ, Momo reveals that a large part of the Master Squad has also been wiped, and before Riri can figure out what is going on, they are attacked by a Magitech unit. Back on the battlefield, Zelshun offers to spare their lives if they let them harvest magical energy from them under Haida's illusions, but Kizuna would rather have people live in a painful reality than a utopian delusion. Zelshun asks Ain if she knows where her core came from, and when Ain fails to answer, she decides to send her a trip down memory lane. After Ain is knocked out, Kizuna vows to pay her for everything and switches into his gear. Meanwhile, Ain finds herself following her past self through a hallway and learns that the core was already installed in her body when Dr. Haida found her. As she finds herself in front of a giant gate, Zelshun amusingly watches Kizuna give his life over someone he loves dearly. Before Ain can enter the gate, her past self asks if she is really sure because she might not be the same person once she finds the truth. Ain starts second-guessing herself, but then gets a flashback of Kizuna offering her a helping hand all those years ago. Meanwhile, Kizuna is getting overwhelmed by the units, but somehow musters up the courage to keep it even. Zelshun is intrigued by his attitude and blesses him by whipping him until he loses his gear. Unable to fight back, Kizuna regrets his failure to save everyone and somehow manages to contact Himikawa, Yuri, and Sylvia in their trance state. Just then, Kizuna achieves a new heart hybrid gear and Shikina reveals that he's managed to reach the climax hybrid with all three of them even without touching them. With this new power, he wipes out hundreds of Magitech units in a matter of seconds, and his power is so overwhelming that even Zelshun struggles to hold him back. Being the first person to push her this far, Kizuna earns acknowledgement from Zelshun, and she decides to go all out against him. However, Kizuna's gear starts shattering for some reason, and Zelshun decides to use Ain's body to finish him off because she knows he won't fight back against her. Meanwhile, Ain realizes Kizuna was protecting her even back then, but the memory is disrupted by live footage of her current body. She sees herself raising her sword at Kizuna, and amid her panic, she quickly opens the door next to her. With that, she regains control of her body and changes into a new form, causing her hair to go pink. Zelshun frantically rushes in to stop the transformation, but Kizuna uses a shield to keep her from harming Ain. Eventually, Ain rises up in the air and causes a giant energy blast, dissipating all magical energy in the area. All those who were under mind control are freed, and all the gates to Batlantis start disappearing at a rapid pace. With the gates sealed, the squad successfully retakes Tokyo, and everyone in the HQ starts celebrating this win. As the city turns into its normal state, Kizuna and Ain hold hands and watch the sunset, hoping that this victory will give them the answers they seek. That's it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to see more recaps like this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.